welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome to First Parish, Unitarian Universalists of Arlington.
We choose
to be
a liberal religious community,
welcoming
to all.
We encourage each other
on our spiritual journeys,
support one another
through the changes in our lives,
and challenge the excesses
and injustices of our time.
Called to love,
and upheld by joy.
We live our faith.
Join with me now as we turn our hearts and minds to prayer. God of all the nations, of all the universe, we are given life, we are given beauty, we are given love. When allowed the opportunity, we can feel profound awe. We can feel interconnectedness and an appreciation for life on our own round blue boat. We may feel it in a huge full moon, in a swirl of snowflakes, or in a warm cup of tea with a friend. Loving Creator, our country and our world are overwhelmingly violent. Help us to transcend the brutality which ramps up more each day. We grieve together the senseless and brutal killing of Renee Good. We pray for the 2 people shot in Portland, Oregon, and grieve for the many, many others injured and killed by Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers. May we support one another as we protest ICE policies which criminalize immigration and enforce borders through fear, surveillance, and force rather than through care. May our love of the sacred in one another continue to tap us into the energy needed to protect and fight for our most vulnerable neighbors. Help us to live our values shared by Unitarian Universalists as well as with other people of faith everywhere, to become a force more powerful than just one person or one belief system. Healing Spirit, remember those today who are sick, injured, and lost. Help us to heal, connect with others, and become who we wish to be in this world. Help us to focus on what we can do with our hearts, our hands, and our feet. Gentle God, allow us all to find a quiet peace, a place to rest our bodies and our minds, a place to recover and revive as we sit in meditation for the next 2 minutes.
Pop quiz time. What are the 2 words that one could say that will make the other person absolutely not trust you? Trust me. Did y'all read my notes for the sermon this morning? I thought those of you growing up in the 70s might have said over 30. Because remember that saying, don't trust anyone over 30, right? So trust is such a big word, and it's thrown around like, you know, I keep wondering, what the heck does that word even mean anymore? So today I want to define it, but before we get into the definition of trust, I wanted to, first of all, use a metaphor for trust. Now, a couple of months ago, Reverend Stevie, during the Time for All Ages, did the marble jar story. Remember that, those of you who were here? Or if not, many of you might have heard about it from Brene Brown. She did a Super Soul Sunday talk, or a TED Talk, called The Anatomy of Trust. And in this TED Talk, so I'm going to start talking about the story, maybe it'll come back to some of you. She started going over how her daughter Ellen, when she was in 3rd grade, came home sobbing one day. And what happened was that she had said something really difficult to her classmates, and the reaction that she encountered, sorry, this is a bit loud, isn't it? We're trying to figure out how to turn the volume down. No, the pulpit mic is off. No, I don't think that's it. Trust me, we got this figured out. So Ellen came home from school, and the thing that she said had a negative reaction. Her classmates and her friends started laughing at her and pointing fingers at her. And this is when the teacher reacted in a way that was probably in alignment with their anti-bullying policies at school. So what the teacher did was he took some marbles out of the jar. Wow, that is loud. And so that showed the class that whenever trust is violated in the classroom setting, that marble jars are taken out. So these marble jars and the trust that we build with one another could be an interpersonal one, like Ellen with her friends, or it could be an institutional kind of trust. And again, by the teacher modeling what it means to establish an anti-bullying kind of atmosphere in the classroom setting, that is a way to build trust with the institution to be able to provide safety for the students. You know what? I'm going to use a handheld mic instead. All right, is this better? So the institutional trust is another way to look at it. And then finally, there's the question of, can you trust yourself? So there's at least 3 different ways in which we could take a look at this word trust. Because after all, see these marbles? This is how we build relationship with one another. These marbles and trust is where relationships begin and end. And I know these are all the same size marbles, but sometimes we could earn trust or lose trust by placing these small marbles or these big marbles. So trust comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. When we talk about institutional trust, for example, how many of you have seen the movie Spotlight? It's about life here in Boston, the diocese here, right? The Catholic diocese, and how clergy abuse has lost the trust of the parishioners. It is going to take a long time for the Catholic Church to build up their marbles again, because guess what? When that happened, a bunch of marbles were lost, right? And it's taken 2 popes so far to try to figure out how to regain trust from the global community when trust was violated. So similarly, the question is, how do we move forward and how do we rebuild trust? Because after all, again, these marbles are like fuel. And when the fuel is running on empty, any relationship cannot move forward at all. According to Adrienne Marie Brown, we could only move at the speed of trust, right? We could only move forward, our relationships could only move forward at the speed of trust. So I told you that I was gonna define trust. Well, I'm gonna steal again from Brene Brown. And she calls it the anatomy of trust because trust for her could be broken down into the BRAVING acronym. That's BRAVING. So what does that stand for? The B stands for boundaries. So we're more likely to trust someone with good boundaries, right? And it's such a big topic that I'm gonna save it for a sermon 3 weeks from now. So that'll get you to come back. So today, I'm gonna start with R, reliability. And to talk about reliability, I'm gonna tell you a story about a congregation, something that happened in a congregation during Pride that may or may not be based on a real life congregation that I may or may not have encountered before in the past. And so to read more about this story, I actually wrote a blog piece on the UUA website called How to Have a Racy Conversation, RACI. So this, which is another acronym, which stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, and Informed. And don't worry, I've subjected the leadership to read this article, and we have a discussion about it later on this afternoon. But part of the story goes that there was this one time when there was a Pride parade that the congregation marched in, and the minister was there, and the minister was interviewed with a local news reporter. But what happened earlier on that day, when all the marchers from the congregation were gonna participate in the Pride parade, there were 40 people who showed up. And they were all happy and ready to go. But there's only one thing missing from the Pride parade. And guess what it was? Banners and signs, right? So how are they gonna identify that congregation? Or how are they gonna know what that congregation actually stood for and what their values were? And let's backtrack a little bit to how did this happen? So, the volunteer who said yes to making up getting the signs there that morning failed to do so. And when asked why he didn't do it, he said, well, I was hoping that the chair of the Social Justice Committee would be the one to do it, right? And then when this chair of the Social Justice Committee was asked, well, how come the banners and the signs didn't show up? She said, well, I thought Norma was going to be in charge of that. So because of a confusion around communication and lack of awareness around lanes and who's responsible for what ended up happening was there were no banners and there were no signs for Pride. And as you may know, newscasters need to focus on something when they're interviewing people and when they need B-rolls, right? So guess what got featured in the evening news that day? A Chihuahua wearing a rainbow-colored sweater, right? And as cute as that Chihuahua was, I still felt like there was a missed opportunity here because of one person's reliability, right? So reliability is so important to building trust that our yeses are strong and wholehearted whenever we say yes to something. And A stands for accountability. And again, going back to the situation, instead of this blame game of so-and-so said that they were gonna bring it and then I'm gonna blame so-and-so and you go further down the road, right? And of the blame game, what if we were to take responsibility for our actions and own up to it and say, yeah, I did screw up, I did forget, I'll do better next time. Isn't that a better way to build trust if we hold each other mutually accountable, to talk honestly about the intent? Well, I intended to bring it, but I forgot. So I'm sorry about my actions, and I own up to the harm of not having any banners and signs for the Pride Parade and inadvertently shining the spotlight on that Chihuahua, right? So mutual accountability, it goes a long way to build trust. And then the V stands for vault, just like a bank vault, right? So V-A-U-L-T. And notice that vaults are meant to keep something in so that it's safe. And there's usually a code that would get you into that vault as well. And so these are the moments when we, out of a sense of vulnerability, perhaps share something that's going on in our life that is super important to us, but that we don't want everyone else in the world to know about, right? So it could be an issue that we're struggling with ourselves, whether it's an eating disorder or an addiction, or perhaps we're just going through a very acrimonious divorce process. And we want to tell our friends and confidants about it in order for us to be able to find an outlet, but yet not to keep it too far out. So that's why we have a passcode associated with it. So what happens when that friend that we tell our confidences to blabs whatever it was that we told them to another friend? Because as Brene Brown pointed out, sometimes that could be done to hot wire relationships, right? To say to someone else, hey, guess what they're dealing with? But unbeknownst to that person, that actually violates trust, doesn't it? When you put something in the vault and when you give someone the passcode, but they share that passcode with someone else, that is a violation of trust. Now, at this point, you may be wondering, what is the difference between confidentiality and keeping secrets? I love the way the Reverend Nell Newton, a colleague in Texas, phrased it, who said that privacy is held to protect dignity. Confidence is held to protect the vulnerable. Secrets are held to protect the powerful, right? So when we tell secrets, that means that we are consolidating power to only a small group of the inner circle who are in the know. And again, going back to the Catholic scandal, I think this is one of the biggest tools that the institution used that was a big mistake, which is that they held secrets. And only a certain group of people, let's face it, men, knew about these secrets, right? And so I want to say another word about vulnerability, by the way. It's not like when you just first meet someone, you just blab and tell them all your secrets, right? But that confidence and vulnerability needs to be earned when there is enough marbles in the jar. All right, so can we kind of make a more subtle distinction at this point between privacy, confidentiality, and secrecy? So that's V for vault, and then we get to I, which stands for integrity. Brene Brown defines integrity as choosing courage over comfort. So when we do some truth-telling, it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability and authenticity for us to be able to tell our truths, right? So we're choosing courage over comfort when we do that. And She also defines integrity as doing the right thing, even if it's not fast, easy, or convenient, right? So again, there's been a lot of that happening this past week, especially in Minnesota and Minneapolis. It's like, what is the truth here? And can we tell our truth? And can we do the right thing, even if it's not fun, fast, or easy? And then finally, her third definition of integrity is practicing your values and not just professing your values. So how do you live your values out loud is very much a part of having integrity with yourself and with the people that you are in relationship with. All right, let's move on to N, which stands for non-judgment. And I must tell you, as a minister, that is the hardest one for me, because we are called to make moral statements and have a strong moral compass and call it, right? And call an injustice an injustice, for example. And again, like what happened this past week, as a clear moral violation of our values and our principles. So there are opportunities for us to name that, but we live in such a polarized society these days. It's so hard not to be judgmental about those who hold an opposing view from you. Can I get an amen to that? Or am I the only one? So, you know, one of my colleagues said that we Unitarian Universalists are an opinion-full faith. And I get that, and I value our opinions, but is there a way to somehow hold our opinions lightly instead of tightly sometimes, right? That we recognize that everyone else is, yes, entitled to their opinions, but as I listen to them, and as I have a civil dialogue and conversation with them, and as I build trust that way by practicing non-judgment, how would that enhance my relationship with another person? And I may or may not change my mind by the end of that conversation, but that's not the point. The point is that by practicing compassion and non-judgment, we are able to put more marbles in that jar. And finally, the G stands for generosity. How many of you, when you first hear about that word, automatically think about dollars and cents? A few of you are finance people, thankfully. I'm glad about that. But according to Brené Brown, it's a lot more than that. Again, all these words are interrelated, right? So the concept is that generosity could also be an open-heartedness about our generosity of interpretations, or even a generosity of compliments that we offer one another, right? Back in the 70s, there was a lot of research done by Dr. Gottman and Robert Levinson around what they eventually called the magic relationship ratio. How many of you have heard about that? So the idea, oh, a couple of you, great. Let me give you the mic and have you explain it. So the way this magic relationship ratio works is that for every critique you give someone, it needs to be balanced out by, guess how many positive affirmations? Higher than 3, lower than 7, 5. Carolyn, you got it right. You get a prize. You get a marble. So it takes 5 positive affirmations to balance out 1 negative critique, right? And the research found that this research was done mostly with couples. And so the couples that practice that magic relationship ratio tend to have fewer rates of divorce. So they stay together longer. So what if we were to practice that within our congregation? We could actually live into another G word, which is grace, right? That when we make mistakes, or that when we have an oopsie, or we forget something, or we are unreliable, how do we get back into covenant and call each other back in and have those difficult conversations, and again, practice our generosity of spirit with one another? It's like sharing that umbrella moment earlier on, right? How could we provide a sanctuary to all who grace our doors? So there you have it, braving boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. I believe that is the component on how we not only build and put marbles in the jar, or whenever they're taken away, to also then figure out ways to come back into right relationship and to put more marbles in the jar. So the lesson for today is, don't lose your marbles, people. Because those are very precious. So hang on to them. And I do have faith in all of you that as we move through this process of life, that we will continue to be in covenant with one another, to continue to trust yourself and to trust others around you and to trust our institutions. And the way we do that is not by magical thinking, although we can use the magic relationship ratio along the way, but it is through these marbles that we build with one another, one marble at a time. And notice that it's braving trust, and it's not, the acronym is not EASY or CHEAP, right? So it takes courage for all of us to live into this environment where we are building trust with one another. Are we ready to brave this? Are we ready to build trust with one another? Can I get an amen then? All right.